Erin O'Toole is the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Congratulations, Mr. O'Toole.
There was the moment early this morning that Erin O'Toole learned he is the new leader of Canada's federal Conservative Party. The Ontario MP, alongside his family, won the race to succeed Andrew Scheer. He defeated 3 other candidates in a count that was delayed by hours because of a glitch with the machines that open the envelopes and count the ballots. Erin O'Toole has a month to prepare for the next parliamentary session and the possibility of a snap fall election. We want to bring you some analysis, what happened and where things go from here. Our CBC News polls analyst Eric Grenier is with us after literally minutes of sleep. He's in Ottawa this morning. Eric, thank you very much for getting up to talk about all of this. Good morning.
Good morning.
The delay, the nearly 6-hour delay in announcing the results because of that glitch in the machines that damaged the ballots. To what extent did they damage as well the impact that was potentially there for the Conservatives in announcing their leader?
Yeah, if everything had gone to plan, the Conservatives would have had their new leader giving a speech somewhere around 8 o'clock, maybe 9 o'clock, just in prime time before the hockey game started. Instead, they missed that block. By the time Erin O'Toole got on the stage, it was about 1:30 in the morning Eastern. So clearly, this part of the country did not see him until this morning, seeing clips. And even out west, it would have been people who were staying up pretty late. So I think the Conservatives would have been pretty disappointed that they missed that opportunity. Now, that's not going to decide the next election, but you always want to have at least, your first day to go well. And at least on that front, did not go well.
But the outcome went well for Erin O'Toole, who was not perceived throughout the campaign as the front runner. That was Peter MacKay's title, but it was Erin O'Toole who ended up creating the victory. How did he do it?
Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise that Erin O'Toole was able to keep it as close to Peter MacKay as he did on that first ballot. In a way, he followed a little bit of Andrew Scheer's playbook from 2017. In 2017, Maxime Bernier was seen as the front runner. He raised the most money. He was leading in the polls. We saw the same thing from Peter MacKay. But on that first ballot, Erin O'Toole was just about 2 percentage points behind Peter MacKay. So he was very close. And going into the count, we had all thought that if Peter MacKay was over 40%, then he'd have a good chance of winning. And he was at 33.5%. He was way below. So Erin O'Toole got a lot of second choice and third ballot support from people who supported social conservative candidates like Leslyn Lewis and Derek Sloan. And by the end of it, the final count in terms of the points was 57% to 43% for Peter MacKay. That's a big win when you're talking about a 2-person race by the end of it. And Erin O'Toole won pretty much every province except those in the Maritimes, which is Peter MacKay's home ground. Those are the only provinces that MacKay was able to win. So O'Toole's victory is pretty sweeping here.
But as you say, perhaps determined by the social conservatives within the party, whom he directly courted. The electorate in the country, Eric, as you well know, is more progressive than that segment of Conservative Party membership. So what does he need to do? Where does he need to go in order to win at the general election level?
That'll be the challenge for Erin O'Toole, is that he does have to pivot a bit. He ran a campaign that was primarily geared towards conservative partisans, conservative members, and that we didn't see the same kind of style as much from Peter MacKay, who was, it seemed to have a little bit more of his eye towards the next general election. So Erin O'Toole will now have to pivot. While he has, he says he's pro-choice, he would march in a pride parade. He was courting that social conservative vote within the party because he knew it could be decisive, as it proved to be. But now it's going to be a question of how much space he will give that segment of the party within the conservative movement. About 35% of the vote for Leslyn Lewis and Derek Sloan combined on that first ballot. Without that vote, Erin O'Toole is not the leader this morning.
He certainly sounded the notes of outreach and unity in his acceptance speech. He also, on a couple of occasions, Eric, introduced himself. Hello, I'm Erin O'Toole, realizing that for many Canadians still not really overly sure of who he is and what he stands for. So that first impression and the fact that Canadians don't have a firm read on him yet, is that an advantage or a challenge at this point?
In a way, it's both. An Ipsos poll that was done just recently found that about 2/3 of Canadians didn't know enough about Erin O'Toole to have an opinion about him. So that's a huge segment of the electorate that does not know who Erin O'Toole is, and that included a majority of conservative voters. So even people who should be predisposed to vote for the Conservative Party don't really know much about Erin O'Toole. that first impression, like you said, it can go well. And if that's the case, we might see a honeymoon for the Conservatives, for Erin O'Toole in the coming weeks. But it might not go well, and that's the risk as well. When Justin Trudeau won the Liberal leadership back in 2013, pretty much everybody knew who he was, already had an opinion about him, and the Liberals had an immediate honeymoon in the polls. Not really expecting that with the Conservatives now. And the challenge will be for Erin O'Toole to get out there and for Canadians to see who he is. Of course, it's going to be a bit more complicated with the pandemic, but that'll be the biggest challenge for Erin O'Toole in the coming months.
And in the coming weeks and months, he's going to face a big test when Parliament resumes September the 23rd, the throne speech, the confidence votes that will ensue. What are you hearing in terms of what he said on the wisdom of helping to trigger the fall of the government and a fall election? Where do you think he stands on that? And what in your polling would be the wisdom of that, Eric?
Well, Erin O'Toole has said that he wants to bring down the Liberal government. What he hasn't said is when he will do that. He said that when he becomes leader, if he became leader, this was before he became leader that he was saying this, that he would discuss things with the Conservative caucus to see where the party wanted to go. So he might decide in the end that he will not send the country or try to send the country to an election, or he will vote against the government when there's the throne speech at the end of September. He might be given an out by, for example, the NDP. If the NDP decided to support the Liberal government, then the Conservatives could vote against the Liberals without risk of sending the country to the polls. Based on where things are right now, you wouldn't expect that the Conservatives would do particularly well. We've seen that the New Democrats, the Bloc, they've more or less stayed exactly where they were since the last election. But the Conservatives are down still in the polls. They're trailing the Liberals by about 6 points. And that would probably give the Liberals a bigger minority government, if not a majority government, compared to what they have right now. So for Erin O'Toole, if he is going to be looking at where things stand in the polls, he's got some work to do before he should be confident enough to bring down the government and take a risk on an election.
The calculus that begins right now with the new leader. Thank you so much, Eric. Always great to have you on the program. Our polls analyst, Eric Grenier from Ottawa. Jamie Watt is with us, Conservative strategist of long duration, the executive chair of Navigator, which is a public strategy and communications firm. He's in Toronto, up super early for us, and we appreciate it. Good to see you, Jamie.
Good to see you, Heather.
He was not the front runner. That was Peter MacKay. Erin O'Toole, in some ways, the unlikely challenger, but to that challenger goes the victory. And what's your overall take on that?
Well, I think, first of all, congratulations to Erin and to his family and his team on a spectacular win. Also, obviously to everybody who participated. In democracy, we need people to win and we need people to lose. So I think every Canadian should take our hat off to the whole lot of them for participating. But special congratulations, obviously, to Erin and his team for running a campaign, for not giving up, for understanding that if you just kept at it and at it and at it, and you had a strategy, that you could win. And I think that's what you saw. Obviously, Erin's message resonated with members of the party. I think he understood that there was a difference between running a leadership campaign and running in the general election. And so he got a very good result last night.
On the third ballot, winning with 57% of that. So let's talk about messaging, as you said, for his campaign to win the leadership. He campaigned as the true blue candidate, but there was a different tone and a different outreach, it seemed to me, in his acceptance speech. Let's listen to a little bit more of it, Jamie, and then I'll get your take on that as well.
Why should I be that leader? Because I believe that whether you are black, white, brown, or from any race or creed, whether you are LGBT or straight, whether you are an Indigenous Canadian or have joined the Canadian family 3 weeks ago or 3 generations ago, you are an important part of Canada, and you have a home in the Conservative Party of Canada.
So that is not an appeal to the base, Jamie. What do you hear in that and in other remarks he made in his speech?
Well, a couple of things I would say from his speech. I said, first of all, it was a terrific speech, and I guess he had 6 hours to practice it in his hotel room. But he did a really good job in that speech, coming out of the gate. Often people stumble a little bit or don't make a good use of that opportunity. I would say Erin did a good job on both fronts. He may, though, have set a land speed record for moving from his campaign position to a general election position. That was pretty fast. To do it all in one speech last night. That's, I think, a good sign because the Conservatives need 1 million votes in any given election, and they won't get them with a hard right or a socially conservative-oriented campaign. We know that doesn't work. That's why Mr. Scheer's got something else to do now. So I think moving to that more moderate, inclusive ground was a very clever thing to do. But of all the clips you've played, Heather, the one that mattered the most was the one you played first, where he actually said the most important words. And he said, "I'm going to fight for you." And in politics, on your side and fighting for you, that's what it's all about. Someone to go to Ottawa and to worry about what's worrying you, to fight for the things that matter to you and your family. And that's when he said that, I thought, you know what? This is more evidence that he's on the right plane.
Can I come back, though, to the socially conservative part of the party for a moment, though, with you, Jamie, because there's no doubt he certainly courted those voters in terms of his campaign for the leadership, and directly courted the two other candidates who supported him as the rounds went on. So where does that leave, then, within the Conservative Party, the social conservative wing?
Well, not to be too Ontario-centric, but it may, you might ask Tana Granick-Allen, who made the same deal with Doug Ford, only to be jettisoned from the party shortly thereafter. I don't know, because there's a problem with the Conservative Party has a structural problem. They need the social conservatives, but yet if they pander to the social conservatives too much, it becomes mathematically impossible to win. As someone said last night on television that Stephen Harper was experienced in giving the social conservatives just enough to keep them happy. Maybe Erin will be able to do that. But I think if Erin is going to take on Justin Trudeau, he's going to have a genuinely large tent. He's got to be moved to a much more moderate and inclusive space. And I don't think that's going to make some of that group very happy. But otherwise, he's never going to win. He's be Andrew Scheer the second if he doesn't.
If he's going to take on Justin Trudeau, at some point it would seem that is in the making. How soon, though? September 23rd, back to Ottawa for the House, the throne speech, the confidence vote. What is your thinking with Erin O'Toole as Conservative Party leader now, Jamie, whether there's the likelihood that the Conservatives, as official opposition, will try to trigger an election?
Well, I think that I don't think it would be wise to trigger an election. These things always seem like a good idea, but when you get right down to it, the rookie is always at a disadvantage. And when it comes to campaigning, I would not bet against the Prime Minister. He's a pretty stellar campaigner, and I think it would be a bit of hubris to think that you can just take him on that quickly. On the other hand, if somebody else decides that there's going to be an election, and if the Prime Minister decides it's going to be an election, the Conservatives are in good shape. They are organizationally strong. They've got muscle memory for their political organization. They've got lots of money in the bank. So, if somebody wants to play a game of silly bugger, they can certainly don't have to be worried about it. But what I would say is, even though Erin is an experienced parliamentarian, even though he has been a cabinet minister, he's never been the leader. And there's always a difference between being one of many and being the leader. And I would say he should spend his time, sorting that before he tempts fate with an election.
Well, we certainly heard him nod to that with "I'm Erin O'Toole," and my name is Erin O'Toole on a couple of occasions during that speech last night, recognizing perhaps that the polls show Canadians really are not that familiar with Erin O'Toole. So he has to make this first impression, I suppose, as leader. Carrying on, Jamie, and as a strategist, how important is it, that first impression for Canadians as they're discovering who he is?
Well, it's very important, Heather, and that's why I think I give him high marks for his speech last night. He knew that speech would be, not seen by that many people at 1 o'clock in the morning, but people like you would be playing clips of it again and again and again. And so he put a lot of effort and a lot of work into the speech. I thought he did very well. I think that people will be interested to learn about him because he isn't not well known, and because we've had pandemic coverage and coverage of other issues dominating the news. This race has really not got as much attention as it might. But that things like that sort themselves, especially when Parliament starts and he's in the House every day. He has the lead-off question at question period. you know, when the election does start and he's on an even platform with the Prime Minister, with debates and with coverage and so on. So Canadians will get to know him fast enough.
Thanks for the time this morning, Jamie Watt, as always, a Conservative strategist and the Executive Chair of Navigator, with us from Toronto on the victory for Erin O'Toole. Thanks, Jamie.